Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Mrs. Omi live sessions with Somali professionals. So today we have Ugbaad Aidiid, who's based in Bristol. So Ugbaad, can you tell us all about yourself, please?
Okay. Wa alaikum salam. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be talking today. And so let me just start off with a bit about me. I'm from Bristol, born in Bristol, and I also studied here as well. So for my undergraduate, I studied education, and I initially wanted to become a teacher. So I studied education studies, but then as I was going along, I was quite interested in the research aspect. So for my undergraduate, I researched, the effects of homeschooling, and because I noticed that within the Muslim community in Bristol, a lot of parents were homeschooling. They were deciding to homeschool their children, and I could see that from the outside looking in. The rest of the education community were a bit confused by this, and this idea that they're kind of shutting themselves off. And so what I wanted to do is explore the parental perspective of homeschooling, and go deeper into why they're choosing to do this and that kind of thing. And from that research, it just made me really interested in carrying out research, because some of the benefits of it is bringing to light what communities know is true, and their knowledge, and something that is different from what the status quo is. So for example, we're in the United Kingdom. A lot of what we're taught is from the white British perspective, and since we're here now in the UK, we're settling here, children are growing up here, it's important that our perspectives are heard and listened to, but also that it's also respected. And so that's what I kind of wanted to do with research, and so that brings me on to choosing to do a master's, and I specifically did it in education and policy and international development. And that's because, as well as the UK context, I'm really interested in the African context as well. So specifically, back home in Somali and Somaliland. And so, I wanted to go further into that. And from that, from my master's year, I was able to go into the Iftiin Project, and maybe I probably start talking about that now.
that was my next question, actually. So what is Iftiin? How did it start, and what does it do?
Okay, great. So for this, so the way it came about is that I was given, there was an opportunity that was for funding in my university. So the university has a Temple Quarter campus that they're going to be opening in the city centre. And one of the things that they're trying to do before they open up this new campus is engage local communities. And so I was forwarded this, opportunity, to apply, because what I then thought of is that, particularly the University of Bristol, they've carried out quite a lot of research on us as a Somali community, and we're always often where the participants, and we're on the other side of the table. And so what I wanted to do with this project, I had the idea that we should try to figure out how can we balance the power imbalances that are there. And so what I wanted to do is that if I was going to carry out research on the Somali community, I wanted it to be participatory and community led, so that, because often and it doesn't mean that it's intended, but when research is done on us and about us, it takes us out of the equation and takes us out of the table. We're not sat at the table, we're kind of then told, but it's our knowledge that's being shared. So what I wanted to do was highlight what are the key perspectives and experiences of the Somali community. But I specifically want to do it for the Somali youth in Bristol, because again, with research within the with the university here. It's often done by the older generation, and so when it comes to things like knife crime, when it comes to things like FGM, all of these key things that people speak about in the Somali community, it's often always being told from that generation.
Yeah,
And
the older generation.
yeah, and so while it's great and it's valued, it's often like, oh, here's what the youth are going through, and here's what we need to do for them, rather than what I wanted to do instead was just give them the platform and let them speak. Let them have that opportunity to say, look, here's what we need, and here's what we're going through at the moment. And I really wanted to put Somali students at the center of that, because obviously we've been here in Bristol for since the early 90s, and a big place where a lot of change is happening are schools. And so while the education community are kind of taking on this increased student capacity, we need to understand why there are certain things that are going on, certain key issues that are reoccurring. So from when I was at school and from now, the same things keep happening again and again.
Yeah, it's repetitive. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I kind of want to do is let's not just accept that this is how it is. Let's research it, let's highlight it, and let's try to figure out a way forward.
Find out the root of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, with research, while it's hugely beneficial, often what happens with people who would come in externally is they come and they'll do the research and they'll highlight the key issues that we have. But then what happens next? We're still going to be in this community. We're going to still have these problems. And so say, for example, if you've highlighted that there is huge rates of knife crime, okay, good, you've highlighted that in a report, but what are we going to do about it?
What are the solutions?
Yeah. So what I wanted to also do with this project, and it was a bit, ambitious, but I also wanted to focus on, let's try to map out some solutions that are practical. I'm not talking about changing the world, but a lot of the problems can be, miscommunication and that kind of thing, and bringing the two parties together. And so if it's those types of things, then we can work on them. But there has to be a what next.
I see. No, that's very interesting. I hope you get to where you're heading, and you get all the support that you need from the community as well as the professionals that are involved. Yeah. Now, what impact do you hope to achieve from this initiative, Iftiin? Now, first of all, actually, could you explain what Iftiin means? Right. I know it's a Somali word, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, so sorry, I should have mentioned that. So another key premise of this research is to highlight, because often, so if I give a bit of background, the Somali community in the United Kingdom do not have a good reputation, within the outside. But the thing is, if people get to know Somalis within the community, they understand how, the benefits and the qualities, and we're often, really welcoming people. Mm-hmm. But to the outside, if you don't know Somalis, you often have this particular
perception of them.
Yeah. And so one of the key things that I wanted to do is, and as it relates to education, because obviously the Iftiin is exploring the educational experiences, is to highlight how parents and children as well, Somali children, value education. And one of the subtle ways that I'm trying to do that is even in the title, Iftiin, it's, the well-known Somali proverb, "Aqoon la'an wa iftiin la'an," the absence.
That's right, yeah.
Of light, because often, again, when you're outside the Somali community, and these are what we're hearing, is that they think that because of the way that Somali parents approach education, they're not always active, they're not always involved. It seems as though we don't appreciate or we don't value education, whereas of course you'll know it's hugely important to us. And it's not just maths, English, it's also Muhammad, going to learn our religion, that kind of thing, on Saturday schools. So it's education is a key part of our culture, and so it's just, even in the title, I want people to realize that, it's very important to us and highly regarded. And so that's where Iftiin comes from. It means light. And it's kind of a double meaning, in that, light, in that I want to not just highlight negative stuff. So I also want to just bring about the, the positive aspects of our culture.
That's right. Yeah.
But also, again, the absence of knowledge is the absence of light, highlighting how crucial and how important education plays in our community.
Yeah, and our parents are actually the driving force of why we are here today. So they should be celebrated for that, actually. So the second question was, what impact do you hope to achieve? What's the impact that you're looking for with regards to this project?
Okay, so and again, this project I've focused it on, even though many of the findings may be similar across the UK, I've tried to focus it on a city-wide perspective, because we can make the most amount of change if we focus on a city. Because often when, like you say, the national context, if I say, oh, Somalis in the UK, stakeholders in the city who can make change may feel that, oh, this isn't anything to do with us. But if I say that this is Bristol students and this is Bristol, issues that are happening right here in this city, it's often like it makes people who need to be held accountable. So one of the key things that I wanted to do with this research, and the impact that I wanted to have, is that, again, like I said earlier, how we have these recurring issues again and again. But often, and it's not always the case, but often within our community, we all know what's going on, and we'll say, oh, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. But what are the ways that you can actually challenge it and actually bring about
change?
Effective change? We can't just, one complaint here and one complaint there, and they're not formalized complaints. So do you go to the school? Do you write it up? Do you send an email? So it's like often it gets like forgotten about and brushed under the carpet, and it starts to build up. So what I wanted to do was with this research, that's backed by the university, it's kind of has a key outlet there, and it's saying, look, here's what's happening, and here's a formalized input from the community. Because often we're good at doing the informal things. We'll call up the school, and we may
kick up a fuss or something. Yeah.
But then if that's not recorded, that's not how it works. That's how it works in this country. It has to be recorded.
I always tell the parents that if you're going to get in touch with the school and it's something important, it should always be done in written.
Yes, absolutely, because it's recorded.
Yeah.
And things like, if the school aren't handling it, do you go to Ofsted? Because like if it has to be escalated. So are we always doing it in that way? So those different types of ways. But what I want to do is put it in a formal input of, here's the research. It's recent. The students that took part in this were in years 10 and 11, and it's coronavirus just affected their exams, and so you can't say, oh, this is something that happened a long time ago. No, it's recent, it's now. These problems are still occurring, and we need to do something about it. So then when I have this, or when we as a community have this research and we have this report, we can then go to Bristol City Council, and if the schools are not responding, and we can say, look, here's how a large majority of people in this city are feeling. Because I don't know if I mentioned this, but Somalis are the largest BME group in Bristol, and we don't often have I guess we don't have representation, and so
like a community that represents all.
Yes, yeah, and so we do have community leaders who are doing an amazing job, but I mean like formalized representation in where we're working together as a community. And I spoke about this to community leaders in the city, and they all agree. I said that often what we do in the city is that we'll have individuals who do really great things, but the thing is, we need to be doing it as together, a collaborative approach. And so with this project, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a range of people's opinions and inputs into it. I didn't want it to just be me, because I know, compared to them, I haven't got that experience, and I want to listen and learn, And so, as well as, having the research with the young students, we also had an advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
And on that advisory board included Somali community leaders, councillors from city council, and local teachers as well, because I wanted them to feel that, we're working together as this. Because, if we want to actually make any effective change, we're going to have to do it together, and it's going to have to be a collaborative approach. And so I didn't want it to just be like, oh, here's Ugbaad, it's just her project alone. No, I wanted it to be, let's all work together, and let's all try to, put our heads down and figure this out.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So what are the key problems that you've come across so far? Like, what are the issues the community is like complaining about largely?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say those are?
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to the students, there are a number of key issues that they're facing, and one of them is this idea that there is differential treatment. And so this idea that
Amongst the students?
Amongst the students, yeah. So some Somali students were experiencing differential treatment in comparison to their white counterparts, and it was in 3 particular areas that this was most mentioned, and that's discipline, so discipline, behavior, achievement, and aspirations. And for each of those, they gave examples of how, in the school, for example, when it comes to discipline, a Somali student or Somali group of boys would do an action that was wrong, but so would a white group of boys. But the Somali boys would actually be excluded, and they would face harsh punishment, and the group of white boys would be let off. And it got to a point that even the group of white boys said, "Oh, well, we're doing the exact same thing that they did," and so even the students themselves.
Why aren't we being penalized for it? That's crazy.
It's very and that's just one example, but they gave many examples of how, especially with discipline, that, for example, in isolation, separated learning, the room was often filled with Somali students. And, with separated learning, and obviously each school is different, but they miss a huge chunk of the day,
Yeah, they do.
Out on learning. And I've also, I'll talk about this later, but I've also been going to schools to speak about this. But, if Somali students are missing huge, you have to ask as a school, why are the rooms filled with Somali students? It can't be that we're this disruptive people, and where you have to kind of ask those questions. And things like aspirations, there was a careers workshop held in one of the schools, and representatives from Asda's, Sainsbury's and Tesco's were invited, and the only students that were called to come into the room were Somali students. And so to them, they're feeling like, oh, this is what my teacher thinks I'm capable of. And the representatives from Asda's and Sainsbury's, the cashiers, they said, this is a great thing that you can do after you're done with your studies, And so,
wow.
but we say wow, but the effect that has on you when you're that age. If somebody did that to me at this age, I'd be up, but when you're at that crucial age, and this is how your teachers, think that
I would literally think this is the highest I can get to. This is my limit, basically.
Yeah, and so low teacher expectations was a huge part of this, and there are a number.
So, do you think that the low teacher expectation it's linked back to them not really understanding the community very well, and then making a perception about them?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm using this linked with the Somali parent focus group, because what they said was that there were assumptions made on the intelligence of the students, and also their parents as well. And for example, many Somali parents, of course, speak English as a second language. and there were assumptions made on that, and the idea that, Somali parents aren't educated, and, so therefore they won't be able to provide the support. There were these assumptions that were made, and they were mentioned quite a lot. But actually, from our research, we found that, Somali parents, especially, I'm sure all around the UK, but in Bristol,
they're the most hard-working parents ever. Even if they don't understand the language or may not understand what their children are doing,
but actually,
they'll pay to get that done.
Yes. So, there's a huge number of Somali parents, a lot of Somali parents who pay for tuition, supplementary learning for their children. But one of the parents even said, no language doesn't mean, no English doesn't mean no intelligence, this idea that this Western point of view that, if you have to speak the English language perfectly and that means you're intelligent, obviously the teachers are not saying this, but it comes across that way.
Yeah.
For example, and, a lot of the parents speak very good English, it doesn't have to be, how other parents may speak it. But it kind of sets us apart from the other Black community in Bristol, which are the African Caribbean community, because obviously their parents, they've been through the British education system, and also, their they can speak English, like, as in they were brought up here and they went through the British education system.
Yeah.
So, while they also face racism, it's slightly different because we're kind of seen as this other, we're Muslim, we're Black, and that we're just kind of like, people don't really know much about our community, and they're kind of just starting to figure us out. And so again, what I wanted to do with this project is to highlight, like, Somali children have like high, they want to achieve really well, and they can, and we shouldn't, limit that. But this also, the low teacher expectation, if I just link that with, I'm sure you'll know, what our Somali parents have high expectations for their kids, And so when the child comes to school and their teacher doesn't think that they're going to do very well, and the parents at home is expecting, A's, it can be very difficult for that student themselves, because our parents, Hamza, they really believe in us that we can achieve this and we can become this. But if you don't have that same support in school, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And so what often happens, and, this was mentioned in the focus groups, is that specifically with the boys, is that there's a feeling of, well, what's the point? If I can't please both sides,
That they're torn in between.
Yeah, and it's like, in that case, like, and they don't want to, it's not that they don't want to try, but it's like, well, I'm not going to try because, I keep getting pushed down, because they give examples of how, in a classroom, the teacher doesn't even know the 4 Somali students in the class names, but they know everybody else's names, and so it's like they don't address them, they'll just skip, so it's like you've taken the effort, you can't even take the time to learn their name, and pay attention to them in the classroom, other than when they're misbehaving. And so
this is totally unacceptable, honestly.
I know it, and the thing is, sometimes when they're misbehaving, you have to ask yourself, well, why are they misbehaving? They're not just doing it for the fun of it. They know
maybe it's due to frustration. They're frustrated, with the way the teachers are dealing with them.
Yeah, if I'm sat in a classroom and the teacher is, not paying me attention, doesn't think that I'm not going to get the grades that I can, if I'm being treated differently in terms of, what I do, well, then what's the point? You're kind of putting them in that position to maybe, give up. And that's what we want to avoid, as a community. We want to avoid that. But because when I asked a specific question, do you think that there's a difference between, how Somali girls approach education and how Somali boys do? And the boys actually said in the focus group, they said, yeah, there is, because we feel like the girls try harder, like they're less likely to give up. And this is the try hard, that's their words. And I wanted to ask, I said, like, why do you think that? Because that's like sad to me, that they often feel that, they're much more likely to give up. But you have to understand they're also contending with the fact that they're also Black boys as well, who are seen as threatening. If I just bring up some of the...
Yeah, the fact that they're already discriminated against before
Yeah.
they even get anywhere.
Yeah, and so there were words used throughout the focus group, such as intimidating, a threat, and also the idea that they're dismissed. You know, their answers in class are dismissed. If there are, and I'll come on to this, issues of racism and Islamophobia, schools don't really know how to engage with race in the correct way. You know, we have a workforce in England that is, I think, 87% white British, you know, and this is, you know, especially within, I don't have exactly for within Bristol, but with the schools that are predominantly BME, you know, majority of the teachers are white, and also the leadership team are white.
Are white.
And so they often don't know how to engage with issues of race. And this can be tricky when there are instances of Islamophobia and racism that students are facing. You know, students talked about how their school was uncomfortable talking about race. Yeah, so...
Oh dear. So how long do you think you have left until you finalize this research and you present it to the university? How long do you think you have left?
Yeah, so the research was carried out over the summer, and so from September, October, and this month, even tomorrow, sorry, not tomorrow, the day after, I've been going to schools in Bristol, because what I wanted to do was, you know, rather than, you know, talk about it at the university where I can't reach them, I wanted to go directly to the teachers and the staff and say, look, here's what's going on, and here's how, you know, this community is feeling. And so that's been a key point of mine throughout these past couple of months. And so, you know, the project, hopefully we are, you know, we finalized most of the findings, but it's just reaching out to a few more schools and also
sharing your data with them.
Yes, and so the response from that has been, you know, it's been quite, I guess for the schools, it's quite challenging for the teachers to hear some of these points. You know, some of them have been quite shocked, you know, to learn that their students are feeling this way and the parents are feeling this way. And it's interesting because it's like, it's important to recognize that, you know, many of these teachers are well-intentioned, you know, they don't mean to go do these things and have these patterns. But that's why it's important for us to challenge it in the correct ways, because if we're not challenging this in the correct ways, how will they know what's going on and even though they're well-intentioned, even though they don't mean to be like this way, but if it's causing harm to this community, then it's important that we highlight that and get that point across.
Yeah, in the best possible way. You're right. So are there any key messages that you think you may want to share with parents and parents should know based on your research?
Yes. One of the points that I want to highlight on, and we touched upon it earlier, is that, you know, this idea that we need to start, you know, challenging in the correct forms. You know, it's important that, you know, we hold authorities to account. And when I was talking to the Somali parents, it's obviously quite different. Obviously, this is not all, but, you know, the parents that I spoke to, they mentioned how it's obviously quite different from back home, where you don't often question authority. And often, you know, the schools and the teachers, you'll know who they are, you'll know their families. And so if there were, you know, issues that happened, you'd be able to communicate them effectively to that teacher. You'd often know who that teacher was, you'd often know their family, and so it wouldn't be so difficult. Obviously it's completely different here, and we obviously don't have that familiarity with schools and teachers, and so it's important that, you know, when students are going through this, that they can talk to their parents about it, because and that when they do talk to their parents about it, it's important that we then, you know, find the correct avenues to challenge that. And so if a student is facing, you know, differential treatment, it's important that the parent doesn't let that go and say, oh, here, we're in a different country, just get on with it and focus on ahead. It's important that you challenge
you
that.
hear your child out. It's really important.
Because what happens is something that's happened now 20 years ago is still happening because we as a community are not, showing
addressing them.
Yeah, we're not addressing it directly. And if we address it directly, it's of course uncomfortable. And one of the key things I talk to teachers about is how the school itself is an intimidating place. It's an intimidating place for, a parent of who wasn't originally from here. But imagine if your first language isn't English. The school can be an intimidating place, though they don't mean to be. And so it's important that schools themselves open themselves up more to be more welcoming. And this is of course not all schools, but in that way, the second point that I want to make clear is for Somali parents to be more involved in the school. Because as we spoke about earlier, of course, Somali parents in the background are doing all these things to make sure that our education is, and that our future is
a priority for them.
Absolutely. But in the forefront, are you engaging with schools that outside of parents' evenings? Are you are you becoming a governor? You don't even need to be a parent to be a governor. You can, like any Somalis that are watching this now who aren't parents, you can go ahead and be a governor in your local school, sign up to be, especially if that school has a lot of Somali students in it. It's important because the governing team are the ones that hold schools to account, and it's important that we have some representation there, because when things like exclusions happen, it's nice to have somebody on that team who says, well, actually, do we know why? Rather than just assuming that you're excluded and that's it. It's important that we have those avenues. So getting involved with your school and familiarizing yourself with it. I'm not saying that no Somali parent is not involved. I'm just saying that it's
more of us should do that.
Because other parents are completely involved,
and the other role actually that they can also do, which is another involvement, is become maybe a PTA member of the school. So you're getting to know a lot of the the top players of the school, who the head is, getting to know them on a level. So I really think that's another important role that they can play.
That's brilliant. We do have a lot of Somali parents now who are doing that in primary schools.
Mm-hmm.
We really need also secondary schools as well, so it's just I guess getting involved with the school and taking on the active role, so that again we can be more I guess known, more familiarized with them themselves, so they understand what we're like as a community, what we're like because often it's like the child will go to school, the child will come back, parents' evening, and then that's it. Not for everyone, but for many students. And so it's like they don't know much about the community. And so one of the ways is that, speaking to your child's teachers directly outside of parents' evening. So if there's an issue, because one of the things that were brought up in the focus group with parents is that they're told too late about, things that have gone on. So say, for example, if it's to do with their ability or their
targets for the year or something.
Their grades, it's often too late, and then so the parents have said, we want to be told early. But what I would say is you need to go and actively make sure that you know everything and that you're up to date. And if your child is falling behind, it's up to you to hold that teacher to account and say, what's going on with this, and build that relationship with those teachers so that they know your face, they know your name, and it's just in that sense, I guess, just
being proactive.
Absolutely. And again, just like I said earlier, often with students, Somali students, like this generation, it can be quite a lot of pressure on them to do very well, and like I said earlier, what happens is if they don't think they can get those top grades, they'll just they might give up. But what I guess parents would be great if they did is that if they come home with a C grade, you need to encourage that, because that also you can't just go from a a D to an A, it has to be gradual. And so, okay, let them come home with a C. They'll build up to an A if, you know, with that encouragement, you know, and
Yeah,
that
we should celebrate the C as well. Like,
yeah, we have to
yeah,
celebrate small wins, because often we can be very all or nothing, you know, and then that's not going to help them, you know.
yeah. Too much pressure will also put a lot of, you know, they may all just stop it all at once and not want to go any further. So I think we should celebrate everything. Obviously, I'm saying C should be your minimum. We should celebrate that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but it's how we build up to the A, you know. So to see that in more of the long run, you know, they're not going to come with an A in year 7.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to understand that. Obviously, sorry, they've changed now, but yeah,
there's all these numbers now.
Yeah.
When I did my GCSEs, they were all just letters.
Yeah, like nice. But yeah, and I guess already Somali parents do this, but again, that belief in your child, they really need that belief that, you know, in their ability, that they can do very well. And so it's lifting that, because again, we can't always depend on the schools that they're getting that. So it's like, you know, encourage your child and uplift that, their ability to do well, because it plays a huge part in how you do. You know, if you don't feel, you know, smart or intelligent, you know, most likely you're not going to put the most effort in, you know. So already Somali parents do that, but I would say, you know, just really give that support. And again, understand that, you know, it's 2020 and there are a lot of other things going on for students, especially now. And so I would also just add, especially with lockdown, there's key issues of mental health with young people. And on social media, social media can be a lot, and, you know, they're exposed to quite a lot of negative things. And so I guess just having an open mind that, you know, grades aren't everything. You know, you want your child to be whole at the end of it, right? It's not just, you know, they're not just their degree, they're not just that. They, you know, you want them to be well mentally and as well as physically, you know.
And not every child has to be academically, you know, if they want to just become I don't know, a plumber, they can, if that's what their passion is. So
maybe they're going to be the best plumber in
or they'll own the business itself. So
exactly, yeah. I think that, again, like you said, we have very set careers that are acceptable and some that aren't, you know. And the world is changing now. You know, what's accepted and what's not is changing. And you know, if you know, and many Somali students are quite creative, so maybe leaning into that. But then again, I understand that, you know, Somali parents want more stable jobs, but you have to understand that, you know, if your child has a particular talent or a particular talent, it's important to nurture that. And some of the students did say that they would like to be, you know, given more support. So I know we spoke earlier about the sort of professional network, but again, seeing people who look like them doing all sorts of jobs is so important, you know.
Definitely.
Because I can easily do that, because look, that girl looks like me, she's wearing hijab, you know, see what I mean? It's that kind of
we need to get rid of this limited mindset where we can only become, you know, these professions and go into these kind of professions. So they need to aim high and then just put it in their mind that they can be whatever they want to be honest.
And also what I was just end with is the understanding that from the focus groups with parents and students, one of the key things that they really wanted to do was to, you know, understand that there are positive attributes to our culture, and they really wanted to showcase that to the wider city, and that, you know, the people that, look, you know, we're not these negative, you know, we're not loud. You know, these associations that we're loud.
Stereotypes.
Yeah. So what they really wanted to do was, you know, say, for example, understanding that there is community cultural wealth. You know, often when we do research, we look at what they're lacking. Oh, they're lacking this, they're lacking this, they're lacking that. And what we could do instead is look, what do they have in abundance that we outside could, really benefit from seeing, or, even using themselves. So for example, on the event that I'll be holding on the 10th, we have a section where teachers will be talking about their decolonizing work. And decolonizing is crucial. Do you want me to explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Go ahead, please. I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
So the decolonizing movement is understanding that, look, when we're in education, we have a very narrow mindset and very narrow values and knowledge. But decolonizing asks us, whose knowledge is taught, valued, and represented in schools? It's often old white men, dead white men. It's their thoughts, it's their values, it's their beliefs. But we're told that that is knowledge. And so we hold it high. When actually, we need to decolonize what education is. Within our community, we have so many, so much cultural wealth, especially in terms of education. So say, for example, in English, we have, the rich history of rich tradition of poetry, and it's, students in schools, they learn poetry, but why would we not bring in Somali poets into that, the history of Somalis as poets, and that will work not only to help the Somali child in the classroom to see themselves in a positive light, but also for the white children in the classroom to see, oh wow, look, this is what Somalis are about, this is what they, we're not just the civil war, that happened very recently. We can't just limit ourselves to the civil war. We have a rich history and tradition, and it's important that is celebrated. And also, it's not just to celebrate, it's also people can benefit from this. And that's just one example, but hopefully at the event we'll have some teachers who are talking about the ways that they can bring this, or that they have already brought this into the curriculum, because we're in this country, we've settled here, and it's important that Somali British students feel that they
wanted and to be part of this society.
Yeah, and that people who look like them have made a valuable contribution to society, and it's just emphasizing that.
So when is this event, Ugbaad, and how can people get hold of this event? Is it online?
Yeah, so obviously because of COVID, we had to do it on an online webinar, but the event is on the 10th of November at 5 p.m. It's for an hour and a half. And so I'll be sharing some of the key findings, but also I wanted to have a section for teachers in Bristol who are working on decolonizing the curriculum. Because what I wanted is, again, like I said, I don't want it to be this negative, we're doomed, I want it to be positive and understand that, look, here, there are some issues, but what is some best practice and what are some ways forward? Because I will be, teachers have been invited to this event, and also members of the Somali community have been invited. And it's just to understand that, look, whilst we do have these key and recurring issues, here are some, examples of best practice that we can maybe take inspiration from and, work to move forward. Again, it's not going to be overnight, but we have to start somewhere.
Okay, good. So going back to the topic of the research, is this something that you're thinking of rolling out to other cities, for example, maybe London? Because we could definitely use that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to, so I wanted to ask you, some of the things that I've spoken about, would you say that, there are similarities within the Somali community there?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, some of my nephews and nieces, some of them have completed their GCSEs now, some are doing their A-levels, and they've all expressed the same exact views. And obviously London's much bigger, so you can just imagine the amount of issues that they have, and maybe they just don't have the the courage to speak about it. So maybe definitely consider that if you're able to maybe come over here to London and connect with other universities that are willing to do the same project here.
Absolutely, no, that's a really key point. I want to get your perspective on this, because during the parental focus group, some of the parents were saying the ways that London is sort of different from Bristol, in that Bristol, we have it's the city is quite segregated, so we have whereas compared to London, of course, it's less multicultural. And so often Somalis stand out in Bristol, in the classrooms, and obviously in the schools, we stand out as within the city. But they were talking about how in London, because there are many, there is quite multicultural, often Somali students may be able to do better there because of that. And I just wanted to get your perspective on, if you think that,
I think that to some extent, yes, because there are other, obviously, ethnic minorities here, and London's quite, diverse city. But I would still say, I mean, this is my opinion, I'm not in secondary school, but I would still say we obviously would have a lot of those issues that you've mentioned, that Bristol is also going through. So this is me just reaching out. I think you should definitely do something over here in London. I'm sure it'll be very successful, just as much as it is over there in Bristol.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So what does the future hold for you then, Ugbaad? What should we be looking forward to?
So for now, so I've obviously finished my master's, and I'm really grateful to be still working on this project after it. And obviously, with COVID, there's a lot that's going on. But because I can't say too ahead, because obviously I'm not sure. But for now, I'm just really focused on, getting this project out there while the momentum is still there, because obviously, I was worried that, it'd be quite difficult to get people in the city that aren't from the Somali community interested in this, but actually it's been quite, they've been quite attentive towards this. And I think that has a key link to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know, maybe you'll find, but it's hard to get people to listen to talk about race in the first place. So now if it's opened up that, then it's important that we get, people talking about this. And even if it is uncomfortable, it's important that we focus on this.
We definitely have to maximize on the current situation while it's still lively and happening. So are you ever gonna go into the classroom and teach then, Ugbaad, or this is it?
I don't know, maybe, hopefully, inshallah. I am quite enjoying the research aspect, but I think, it is important to have Somali teachers. So I am, that is on my mind to, hopefully maybe go and do a PGCE, just because it is important to have that. But there are, that is obviously on my mind, but obviously, inshallah, we don't know what the future holds.
I don't know. Okay. Oh my God, I would love to ask you more questions, but is there anything else that you'd like to ask maybe?
So I just wanted to ask, because obviously I've talked about, key practical solutions. What would you say, like, I guess with this research that we have now, what are the ways that we can make some sort of effective change? And I'm not talking about big things, but what are the key small things that maybe I can work on?
The number one, I would say, for the parents to definitely develop some sort of a good communication with the school. From my side, obviously, not as a parent, but as a teacher, I've noticed that a lot of the problems is coming down to communication problem. So it's like you said earlier with the parents' evening, always finding out maybe on the third term that your child was lacking in this subject or didn't do so well in the assessments that they did on termly. But if you're able to communicate the first parent evening that you have, and which usually happens around October, right before Christmas holidays maybe, like, where's your child at? And to go maybe with specific questions. Your child better, but then they also know that child much better when they're in the classroom. So you go with specific questions and find out, do they have enough friends? Do they get on with everybody in the playground? Ask how they're interacting in the classroom. Is there any subject that they find more challenging than the others? And then that way you're able to help your child at home. Maybe if you're not able to do so, then provide the support, whether it's a tuition or maybe a family member that could help out. to do so. But I really think having a good communication with the teacher, it's really, really important. That's my one advice to parents, because a lot of the times it's always, there's a lot of assumptions going on, and when you hear both sides, you can clearly see that there's a communication problem there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really useful.
Yeah,
it's really great.
Okay, so Ugbaad, thank you very much for your time. Honestly, I truly appreciate it. I've been following Iftiin for quite some time, and I can't wait for the event on the 10th. So I'll see you there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wa alaikum salam.